She opened her eyes and saw flowers. She heard crying. She heard a prayer being spoken above her head. The room smelled of candles and perfume. She tried to move and felt the walls of a wooden box pressed against her shoulders. She looked up and saw the faces of her husband, her sisters, her neighbors. All of them were dressed in black. All of them were weeping. And then she understood. She was lying in a coffin. She was at her own funeral, and she had been declared dead 2 days ago by a doctor who was wrong. She screamed. The room fell apart around her, and 12 minutes later, she was dead. This time for real. This is not a story from the 1800s. This is not a ghost legend or a gothic novel. This happened in Russia in 2011, and it is not the only time it has happened. Not by a long way. To understand how a living person ends up in a coffin, you have to understand how death is confirmed. When a doctor is called to examine a patient who is unresponsive, they look for a specific set of signs. No pulse, no breathing, no response to pain, fixed and dilated pupils. These are the classical markers of death. In a well-equipped hospital with time and monitoring equipment, these checks are thorough. But in an emergency home visit, in an overwhelmed clinic, in a rural hospital with limited resources, those checks can be rushed. They can be incomplete, and certain medical conditions can mimic every single one of those signs so convincingly that even an experienced physician can be fooled. The word for one of those conditions is catalepsy. Catalepsy is a state of rigid muscular paralysis. The body becomes stiff. Breathing becomes so shallow it cannot be detected. The heart slows to a near stop. The person is alive but appears, by every external measure, to be dead. Seizures, severe shock, certain neurological events, and even extreme emotional trauma can all trigger it. A person in a deep cataleptic state can lie perfectly still, cold to the touch, unresponsive to sound and pain, for hours. And if a doctor arrives during that window and declares them dead, nobody will know the difference until the coffin moves. Fajilia Mukhamatsianov was 49 years old and lived in Kazan, the capital of Tatarstan in Russia. She had a husband named Fajilai. They had been married for years. On an ordinary day in June 2011, Fajilia began complaining of chest pains. Fajilai did not wait. He drove her immediately to a clinic near their home. By the time they arrived, she had lost consciousness. The doctor on duty examined her. He found no pulse. He found no breathing. He declared that Fajilia had suffered a heart attack and had died. Fajilai was told his wife was gone. He was told to make arrangements. In Russia, there is no legal requirement for embalming before local burial. Fajilai chose not to embalm her. He wanted to bury her quickly, in the traditional way. Fajilia was placed in a coffin. Her body was dressed. A date was set, and 2 days later, family and friends gathered in their home to say goodbye. Fajilai stood beside the open coffin. He looked at his wife's face. He thought she was dead. Everyone in that room thought she was dead. They were all wrong. Fajilia opened her eyes. She sat up. She looked around the room at the people crying over her. She heard the prayers being spoken for her soul. She understood exactly what was happening. She screamed. Her husband recalled what happened next. Her eyes fluttered, and we immediately rushed her back to the hospital. But she only lived for another 12 minutes in intensive care before she died again, this time for good. The shock of waking at her own funeral is believed to have triggered a second cardiac event. Her heart, already compromised, could not survive the terror of that moment. She had survived being declared dead. She had survived 2 days in a coffin. She died from the shock of knowing it. Fajilai told reporters he was furious. He said the hospital was carrying out an investigation. No further updates on legal proceedings were ever published. The doctor who misdiagnosed her was never publicly named. The investigation, if it ever concluded, did so in silence. Now go back further, to France, to 1937. Angelo Hayes was 19 years old. He was riding his motorcycle when he lost control and flew headfirst into a brick wall. His face was so badly damaged that his parents were not permitted to view the body. A doctor examined him and could find no pulse. He was declared dead and buried 3 days later. But Angelo's father had recently taken out a life insurance policy on his son. The insurance company grew suspicious of the rapid burial. They requested that the body be exhumed just 2 days after the funeral. When investigators opened the coffin, they found that Angelo's body was still warm. There was a faint heartbeat. He had been in an extraordinarily deep coma. His body's reduced need for oxygen had kept him alive inside the sealed coffin. He was brought to a hospital. He underwent several surgeries. He made a complete recovery. He later became a celebrity in France. People traveled from across the country to meet the man who had come back from the grave. In the 1970s, he went on tour with a safety coffin he had personally designed. It featured padding, a food supply, a chemical toilet, and an alarm system. Angelo Hayes had been buried alive and survived. He spent the rest of his life making sure it could not happen again. The 19th century was obsessed with this fear, and with reason. Before embalming became standard practice, before electrocardiograms existed, before the technology to confirm brain death was available, the medical definition of death was essentially this: the patient looks dead. That was not always enough. Coffin manufacturers in Europe and America began producing what they called safety coffins. These were burial boxes fitted with bells, flags, and strings connected to the fingers of the deceased. A watchman would sit in the cemetery overnight, listening for the bell. If the buried person moved, the string would pull the flag above ground. Thousands of these coffins were sold. Companies competed on the sophistication of their escape mechanisms. There is no verified historical record of a safety coffin ever actually saving anyone. But the fact that people were buying them in large numbers tells you everything about how much they feared what had already been happening. Modern medicine was supposed to make all of this history. It did not. In June 2023, a 76-year-old woman named Bella Montoya was brought to a hospital in Babahoyo, Ecuador. She had suffered what appeared to be a stroke followed by cardiac arrest. She was given resuscitation for an extended period. The doctor on duty declared her dead. Her family took her to a funeral home that same day. Around 5 hours into her wake, with roughly 20 family members present, her son Gilberto Barbera heard a sound coming from inside the sealed coffin. He opened it. His mother's heart was beating. Her left hand was striking the inside of the lid. She was alive. She was rushed back to the same hospital that had declared her dead. She was admitted to the intensive care unit. The Ecuadorian Ministry of Health announced it had formed a committee to investigate how the misdiagnosis had occurred. Bella Montoya died 1 week later. Her cause of death was recorded as the underlying illness. Whether the hours she spent sealed in a coffin contributed to her final decline, no official report has said. In 2014, in the town of Piraea in northern Greece, children playing near a cemetery heard screaming coming from beneath the ground. Investigators were called. A 45-year-old woman had been buried hours earlier after being declared clinically dead by a private hospital. She had asphyxiated inside her coffin. She died not from her illness, but from suffocation in the ground. Her family announced plans to sue the hospital. A separate investigation that same year revealed that a 49-year-old woman in the same region had been buried alive after being treated for cancer. Her family reported hearing her screaming from inside the grave shortly after burial. Investigators confirmed she had died of heart failure inside the coffin. Her cancer medication had suppressed her vital signs to the point where clinicians had misread them as death. 2 women, 1 town, 1 year, both buried alive. In the United States, cases of misdiagnosed death continue to emerge from nursing homes and care facilities. In June 2024, a 74-year-old woman at a Nebraska nursing home was declared dead by staff and transferred to a funeral home. 2 hours later, the funeral home found her breathing. In January 2023, a 66-year-old woman at an Iowa care facility was declared dead after an employee said she felt no pulse and detected no breathing. She was transported to a funeral home. She woke up gasping for air. That same year, an 82-year-old woman in New York was found alive at a funeral home shortly after being declared dead at a nursing home. 3 cases, 1 year, all from the same category of setting, all from the same failure of verification. In Mississippi in 2014, a 78-year-old woman woke up inside a body bag at a funeral home hours after being pronounced dead at her home. She was already being prepared for embalming. The process had not yet begun. She survived. The medical explanation for these events is not mystical. It is mechanical. The human body, under extreme stress, can reduce its oxygen consumption to a fraction of its normal level. The heart can slow to a rate that a brief manual check cannot detect. Breathing can become so shallow that a hand on the chest feels nothing. Pupils, which dilate at death, can also dilate in deep shock, in drug overdose, in severe neurological events. The external signs of death and the external signs of certain profound physiological crises can be, in the wrong conditions, identical. A doctor with limited equipment, working quickly in a poorly lit home or an understaffed facility, can make a mistake that no amount of training fully protects against. The difference between a mistake that is discovered and a mistake that is not comes down to timing. And time, in a sealed coffin, is the one thing the patient does not have. The legal aftermath of these cases is almost always the same. An investigation is announced. A committee is formed. Statements are made by hospital spokespeople. And then, in most cases, silence. Fadjali Mukhamadzianov said he planned to sue. No public outcome of that case was ever reported. Bella Montoya's family received sympathy from health authorities, but no formal findings have been made public. The Greek family said they would sue. Court cases in those jurisdictions move slowly. The Iowa woman woke up at a funeral home and survived. The facility was not publicly named. In most of these cases, the institutions involved face no lasting accountability. The patients whose vital signs were misread have no voice in the proceedings. In the cases where they died before anyone found them, they had no voice at all. What remains unknown is how many times this has happened without anyone finding out. A person declared dead in a care facility, transported to a funeral home, embalmed before showing any sign of life, would leave no evidence. The embalming process would obscure any signs of movement or distress. The death certificate would record the declared cause. Nobody would ask questions. In the 19th century, a researcher named William Tebb compiled records from contemporary medical sources. He documented 219 narrow escapes from premature burial and 149 confirmed cases of actual live burial. That was in a single era, in a limited geographic region, from sources that self-reported. The true number, across all regions and all time, is unknowable. What we know for certain is this. Fadjali Mukhamadzianov was alive when they put her in that coffin. She woke up surrounded by people she loved, dressed in black, saying prayers for her soul. She screamed. She was rushed to the same hospital that had sent her home in a box, and she lived for exactly 12 more minutes. Her husband wanted answers. He wanted someone to be held accountable. The investigation is still ongoing, in the sense that no public conclusion was ever announced. She was 49 years old. She had chest pains. She went to a doctor, and the thing that killed her was not her heart. It was the moment she opened her eyes and understood what she was looking at. Medicine saved millions of lives in the last century. It also, sometimes, fails the most fundamental test of all, the test of knowing, with absolute certainty, whether a person is truly gone. For Fadjali, for Bella, for the woman whose family heard her screaming under the earth in Greece, that failure was not a statistic. It was the last thing they ever experienced.